graduated from law school 6 years ago and took some time off to start a family. During that time, I took some contracts manager roles. For the past 2 years, I've been working for an ALSP, Think Flex by Fenwick, as a contracts manager. I just got sworn into my state bar, and now I'm trying to think about the best way to position myself just to enter the legal market. I had a few internships during law school with a federal judge and two big firms. Should I leave off my contracts manager experience so I don't look less lawyerly on my resume? Do law firms care about legal internship? The law firms are federal judges. For the purposes of finding an in-house position at a firm, is it correct to assume that I would be the junior associate or junior counsel? Thanks for your time. Okay. This resume or this fact pattern looks familiar. I don't know if this is your resume that I've seen, but I remember seeing a resume like this fairly recently. So the idea would be that in terms of your best way to get experience, it depends on what your goal is. You have to look at how a law firm's going to evaluate your resume, or any employer for that matter. But I say law firm because law firms typically know what they're doing when they're hiring a lot better than most in-house companies. If you want to work in a law firm, they're going to wonder why you took time off to start a family right out of the gate, and which is okay. It's okay to do that, but they're going to be concerned about whether or not you're going to want to stick with the practice of law after you join them. The questions when they're trying to hire you: can you do the job? Do you want the job? Will you do the job long term? Do we like you? These four questions are among the most important questions that you need to ask yourself, or that a law firm's asking when they're trying to hire someone. Doing the job means whatever type of job you're trying to do you have the experience to do it? So I'm assuming if you did these law school internships, you have pretty good skills. But their questions are going to be about your back. Do you have the skill to do the work? Do you have the smarts? Do you have the potential motivation? Are you going to be able to commit to the level they want you to, even though you have a family, and that sort of thing? Then the next question is, how much do you really want the job? People that want something, it comes across when they're interviewing. They have a passion. They talk about it in a certain way. They've studied the firm. All that stuff comes across. And it comes across in terms of how well you interview, the enthusiasm, how much people think you really want to work there, all that stuff. And if you have that enthusiasm when they're interviewing you, then that's very good. But if you don't, then that's problematical. If you were to look at your resume, it doesn't say you really want something. So someone that really wanted something might say something along the lines of, I've always wanted to be a family lawyer in a law firm because I'm committed to helping children. You have to have motivation to do something. Your question, do law firms care about legal internships with law firms and federal judges? Yeah, of course they do. But they care more about jobs with them. Just working a summer for a law firm, you're not going to really learn very much. The same thing with a federal judge. The other one they're going to be asking is, will you do the job long term? So that's an interesting statement. Are you going to stick with something over the long term? I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but I've hired lots of people in the past that ended up leaving to go do other things and have kids. Things could have picked up when I was interviewing with them, but not necessarily have kids, start businesses or in other fields or go into other things that I should have picked up right away. One girl I'm thinking of, when I interviewed her, she was all interested in acting and talked about acting, and then I hired her, and then sure enough, she went and interviewed. And then I've hired other people that just were going back into the legal market, but really were more concerned about other things than working. So someone needs to know if you want to go into the job long term or not, and if it's something you want to commit to. If an employer is interviewing two people, one person, they're going to ask, is that person likely to stick around? Because a law firm, it's a lot of work to bring people in. It's a lot of work to hire people. So if the law firm thinks you'll stay, then they're going to be interested in hiring you. Your experience right now, you said you took some contract manager roles. So I don't know if that means you'll stick with whatever you do. If you've been a contracts manager before, then that's a good job to have in an in-house company. And I would think your background's very good for that. But for the purpose of finding a position, you would be a junior associate of counsel. The good news about all this, even though it may look a little negative, is that the economy is very good right now. People are taking risk on people. And if you've already started a family, that's probably a way that looks like you'll probably stick with a job long term as opposed to maybe leave. If you really want the job now, all that stuff is good. But these are all questions that people are asking. The smartest thing you can do is put yourself in the position of an employer whenever you're interviewing with someone, because you need to ask these questions. And if you were the employer looking at you, you'd have to ask these things. And they're really asking this. Can you do the job? Just means, do you have the ability to do it? People get hired for jobs all the time where the firm could hire someone better, but people answer those questions. The final thing is, do we like you? If someone really likes you, that's huge. You can get hired for jobs that you normally would never get if you flatter the right person. Even though I'm talk about hiring, study it, talk about it, write about it, and place people for a living, I've hired the wrong people many times because I really like them. The worst attorney that I ever hired was this older woman that was in her 60s or 70s that walked into my office one day and told me how much she admired me and everything and knew I had a job and wanted me to hire her. And I really liked that and hired someone that was very incompetent. That was a mistake. I've hired a lot of people before that I wouldn't have hired normally. That person actually just walked in off the street. They didn't even apply for the job and that got my attention. If someone really likes you, then they will hire you for jobs that they normally wouldn't. And that can make a big difference. It's one reason that, for example, men or women that are very persuasive or very presentable and make a good impression are often liked and get jobs. I've seen people show up to interview in suits and just know everything about the company. I had one person interview once that must have been professionally prepared to talk to me, but he just came in and knew everything I'd ever written and was prepared to talk about it and interviewed extremely well and then was hired, and he'd been unemployed for a couple of years before I hired him. And it was just for some sort of marketing role and didn't do well. So a lot of times if someone likes you, they'll hire you for jobs you normally wouldn't get. All this other stuff about doing the job long term, being able to do the job will be ignored. So there's ways to get around it. You just have to be very careful about all this stuff. And I give you all that information just because I'm trying to help everyone in this call get a job. All these things need to come together for you to get a job. The better you do it, the better off you'll be.